It's 1 o'clock. I know we will have people joining in late. We like to stay on time because we're just like that. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining. My name is Mariette Abraham, CEO and founder of Qina, the hub for data and insights in personalized nutrition. And today it's a joint webinar with the team at Lumiera. And I will leave them to introduce themselves. But just a few housekeeping tips just before we start. This session is recorded, so if you don't want to be on video, please switch off your video. Please do mute yourself so we don't have any background noise as people come in. We will also try and spotlight the speakers, so at least you will see who's speaking, but you might see icons moving in and out as people join, because we are not able to switch off cameras as people join. So it might be a little bit disruptive, but keep your eyes on the speaker and the slide. We should be good. Okay. We will be sending out the recording and the slides at the end, which will be available on the Qina platform. You will get a notification via email. So everything will be available in case you are not able to stay the whole time, but do make sure that you get in touch. We will also have the opportunity, about 20 minutes we're aiming for, of Q&A. So please write your questions in the chat. If there are questions that come up for you, and we are making enough time available for you to ask your burning questions as well. So with that, I will hand over quickly to Allegra and Emma to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Mariette. It's really nice to be here today. Hello to everybody. My name is Allegra Guinan. I am the co-founder and CTO of Lumiera. We are a boutique advisory firm helping leaders make better, more responsible decisions around AI. And I'm really happy to be a part of this panel discussion. I'll pass it over to Emma, my co-founder.
Thank you, and thank you, Mariette, for inviting us to this webinar. At Lumiera, we do have a responsible approach to AI, which is basically the only focus is to build good, high-quality products and AI products, and make sure that we actually understand what we are using and what we are building. Our focus is multidisciplinary, which means that we don't only take one factor or one type of knowledge into consideration when we set strategies or when we support our clients, because we believe that good strategies are made when you understand the problem in a holistic way, because then you can also build holistic solutions.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to dive straight in it. We have a very strict timeline that we've set for ourselves. So I'm going to dive in first on the nutrition part, and then we'll dive in for the EU AI Act part. And as I said, please just write in any questions that you have so that we can answer them. So let's start off with the nutrition part. So AI, artificial intelligence, is already being used in a lot of nutrition and health solutions. Just to check, you can see my slide, right? On your end, did it change? Right slide? Fantastic. So it's already being used in terms of solutions with image recognition and recipe and meal recommendations for nutritional analysis. So using computer vision, for example, you just take a picture of your meal and you can have it analyzed. You can have recommendations directly from your coach, for example, and also for food logging. Identification of bioactive compounds. So this has also been identified in, for example, in upcycled materials. But we also see new solutions being developed that use product scoring. So you get like a metabolic health score, or you get a product score to see how well a product or an ingredient or even a meal or a recipe matches your personal profile. If we look at what the market looks like at the moment, AI has really kind of taken off in personalized nutrition. So there were really only a handful of products leveraging AI just a few years ago. And so our data stretches back from about 2018. And now we have around 280 companies on the Qina platform that we are tracking. And you can see from this breakdown here that when we're looking at AI and machine learning, it's the bulk of the solutions. Yeah. So these are your solutions that help to match your personal profile with your preferences and your health goals to then come up with product recommendations or meal recommendations and develop a recipe plan for you that matches the ingredients to what it is that you want to achieve or what it is that you want to consume. So that is the majority of the market at the moment, but we are seeing a rise in the number of solutions that incorporate computer vision. So that's image logging, facial scanning, for example, and also using voice activation. So instead of having the image logging where you're snapping a picture of your food, you're actually logging your food using voice. So you just talk into it. And this is really using voice activation in combination with kind of like WhatsApp technology. So you just talk into your phone and it'll log it, and then you have to confirm whether that's what you've actually eaten and this portion size as well. So this is really where we're seeing a shift in the market, as well as generative AI. We see more and more companies trying to combine these different data sources from your wearables, from your dietary, your surveys, for example, your logging data, your emotional, your mood, and trying to then come up with recommendations of what you need to do and also predict what it is you need to be doing in order to reach your health goals. Digital twins is still the smallest percentage of that, but we expect that to grow, as well as we are seeing a growing number of research projects, focusing on personalized nutrition within this digital twin arena. When we look at this webinar relevance in particular, there's been one interesting poster. So at Qina, we are part of the Personalized Nutrition Initiative at the University of Illinois, which really looks at kind of non-competitive research and looks at what needs to be done to be able to develop these evidence-based solutions in personalized nutrition. So this in particular study looked at what are the kind of privacy policies that these personalized nutrition companies are putting online and the kind of data that they are collecting to be able to provide personalization, but also drive these AI algorithms. And so they looked at 68 companies within the personalized nutrition industry and then extract their privacy policy and then see what they are collecting, the kind of data that they are collecting. So you can see just from this first block here, I know it's a little bit small, but you can see personal identifiable information. And these can include things like name, your date of birth, which is quite, normal. But then we get to the more scary parts, which is social security number, your passport number, your driving license number. I mean, this is quite scary stuff if you think about personalized nutrition. You do not get personalized nutrition information based on your driving license number. So this is kind of where we really need to open up our eyes and thinking, hey, what is really happening not only in the industry, but where are we increasing the risk as consumers are more interested in personalized nutrition, and how these technologies and solutions are coming onto the marketplace. So when it comes to personal information, so we can see kind of interest and sleep habits, beliefs are also ways that consumers are interested in receiving, recommendations, and then also having their kind of wearable data. So there is a need for sharing personal data, of course, and then we get into biological data that drive these algorithms as well. But it's really looking at, okay, what information is being used to then fuel these AI algorithms. And then when we look at kind of the regulatory framework that apply in personalized nutrition, it's not just one. So personalized nutrition really sits at this intersection of course, health and food and technology and society, and so many different frameworks really apply to that. So just as an example here, we can see that GDPR applies in terms of privacy. We're looking at functional foods. If you have a health goal, for example, where you want to address your health goal with foods or beverages, so what kind of functional food claims are relevant there? We're looking at medical foods specifically. For example, if you have cancer, we see new personalized nutrition solutions coming out there as well. Whether your app provides advice using a medical device, so nutrition advice based on the data from a medical device is another framework. And of course, nutritional supplements, which is kind of large chunk of the personalized nutrition industry. There are claims, health claims, nutritional claims, and also regulations in terms of the levels that can be added are also applicable. But just to highlight, we will not be speaking about those today. We will only be speaking about the EU AI Act, which is where the AI solutions really come in. So that's really the focus of today's webinar. So if we look at the market changes that are happening at the moment, we see some changes not only in terms of the types of AI that is being leveraged. So I already mentioned, machine learning and computer vision, natural language processing are already AI technologies that are being incorporated, but we are seeing a shift towards using edge AI, which is where there's going to be a more exchange of data and consumers being able to share their information with who they want to, because they actually own their data and now they want to get benefits and rewards from that. And so this edge AI is going to also disrupt the market, or not disrupt, is going to shift the dynamics in the marketplace, and therefore it's estimated to grow into about 265 nearly billion by 2032. So we're going to see significant shifts in terms of how AI is employed, and especially in the health arena and personalized nutrition arena, we can really expect some changes here. So if we look at just kind of what are the opportunities of leveraging AI, this is AI, of course, has got many opportunities. Not only it's a level of speed that it can analyze different data sets, for example. It can improve operational efficiency. It can help with cost savings. And so there are many opportunities. And of course, at Qina, we use AI all the time, responsibly. But so, of course, there are very good upsides, but we have to, of course, also be very vigilant about the risks and opportunity, the risks and threats that AI poses. So if we just take a few of the use cases looking at personalized nutrition at the moment, I want to just highlight a few. The first one is around personalized nutrition solutions that use biomarkers to then provide personalized nutrition recommendations. So of course, here's a risk already, because you need to understand not only whether the biomarkers are even relevant for health, but how do they fit into maybe the clinical guidelines, clinical practice guidelines, and who set up the ranges that are normal. Yeah. So if you have already in mind that you're going to provide some recommendations based on that, you really need to know what you are working with and what are the kind of biases that you are working with as well, and what the research actually tells us about who those biomarkers have been tested in. If we look at products using a product score or a meal score, we also need to understand what is the gold standard of dietary pattern, for example, that is being used to then provide recommendations. So if you use the Mediterranean as your gold standard, or you use the Nordic diet as your gold standard, that needs to be very transparent if that is the baseline of your AI system. So it's very important and very quickly to get down a rabbit hole of just applying AI without thinking through really what impact it may have for people who may not be following those dietary patterns. The third one is around face scans. So there's been a lot of controversy also around face scans, not only that it depends on the databases that have been used to train these AI algorithms. So for example, women or women with darker skin tones do not get picked up as easily on these facial scans, but we're seeing more and more of these personalized nutrition solutions that come onto the marketplace using face scans as a way of detecting dehydration, for example, and then providing recommendations based on that as well. One other one is around generative AI. So here we're looking at which content are you using, whether it's on the internet or whether you are summarizing or creating a database of different data sources relating to nutrition and health. How is that relevant, and how is the generative AI then coming up with these recommendations and these summaries, and are they actually at risk of being biased? So in the industry so far, what we've seen at Qina is that companies have a very good way of, almost like this analogy of sitting in an airplane. So your window's view is great. So you are a nutrition expert and you look at the science and you're very particular, you're excellent at being critical. And the data scientist looks at their own window, but they can only see really what they are looking at without necessarily, if you're taking a systems approach, what the potential societal impact might be at a much lower level. So it's very important, as this AI Act comes into force, that we take a holistic view and look at what should we be looking at if we're going to employ AI responsibly from a different domain expertise point of view to benefit the end consumers. So of course, risks and challenges in nutrition health, if we don't get that right, means that there's a risk of spreading misinformation. There's algorithmic bias if we're just favoring a particular group. There's also limited research in that we are providing personalized nutrition advice when we only have a very limited body of research, even just considering women, for example. And if we're just using these huge databases to then provide recommendations that are unsupervised by humans or the expert eye, really poses a challenge for building trust within the industry. So if we don't get that right, of course, if you missed this news earlier in the year in May, when Google launched their LLM and then recommend when you type in how do you make cheese stick to a pizza, they recommended to use non-toxic glue, which of course is not true. That is really the risk and the level of misinformation that we are up against. And so it's really important for us to get this right. And with that, why now hand over to the Lumiera team to talk about the EU AI Act and how that can really help us to get things right within the industry. Over
Yes,
to you.
Thank you, Mariette. As mentioned, in Lumiera, we have different types of knowledge and we combine it. So my background is I've been a lawyer for a long time, and now I'm a certified AI for business strategist. And together with Allegra's perspective here today, that has the more technical perspective of things, we're hoping that we're going to be able to guide you through the basics and make sense of this massive piece of regulation that the EU has put on our tables. If we look a little bit at what the purpose of the act is, the EU always creates their regulations based on a purpose. So in this case, it's actually a matter of trust, as Mariette mentions as well. We want to have a functioning inner market in the EU. We want to make sure that a product that is built in one country can also be sold in another country. And we want to make sure that consumers are safe. So ultimately, this type of regulation is made to make that happen. It does involve some complexity, and it is quite a fair bit to navigate for people or for companies that are providing or building AI. But at the moment, I would say that we're starting early, because the EU AI Act has not even been fully implemented yet. So in the EU, it's actually the first regulation worldwide on AI, the EU AI Act. And it's really focusing on these health and safety and fundamental rights against the effects of AI systems. So, as I mentioned, the EU AI Act has already entered into force, but the implementation period is gradual, and we will start by looking at the AI systems that are considered to be the most harmful, basically. So we are rolling out this regulation, which means as well that if you have a product or if you're using AI in your company, you need to understand what part of the AI Act relates to which system, which is something that we will go into a little bit further in a bit. And it will actually not become fully applicable until 2026. And even after that, there are some exceptions. There are also ways that the legislator has set up ways to change the regulation throughout, so to adapt it to this technological development that is very rapid, and adapt it to the market as well, that is changing a lot.
Excellent.
Yes, please. So again, the scope, and where it becomes very important to not just understand the regulation as such, but also the way that you are using technology for the products that you are buying or using internally in your company, but also, of course, communicate it to your users or to your customers. The way that the EU AI Act is set up as a system is that we're looking at different categories where we have some prohibited categories. These are products that are considered to be harmful in one way or another for users or for society, and therefore it's really not allowed to roll them out on the market. We also have the high risk products. Many of the products that are used or developed in the personalized nutrition field tend to fall into this category because of the type of data that is being used, and because of the type of advice or decisions that are being made regarding people's health, basically, when using these decisions. And then we have limited risk and minimal risk. And there are many different factors depending on where an AI system or where an AI product falls into which type of category. And it's quite detailed, so it's not something that we're going to dive much deeper into the specifics now. But the important thing is to, in order to prepare, have some good practices around AI in your company, know what you're doing, know the information and the types of processes that are involved, so that you actually understand what you have working in your company, and within which category these types of systems could fall, basically.
Yeah, so as Emma mentioned, there's a lot of data that's involved in this, and the more complex data that you're working with, that's generally how you get more personalized systems, and that's something that we see the industry trending towards. Probably if you're working in this industry, you want to offer the most personalized experience to your end users. So you need more data for that kind of decision making. And with that comes higher risk. So within these risk categories, if you are working with a lot of personal data, some of the data elements that Mariette pointed out earlier, you will probably fall into a higher risk category, also depending on how you use it. So safe, transparent, traceable, and non-discriminatory systems are really important for personalized nutrition. So as was mentioned earlier, we need to understand what these standards are that are being placed into systems. When you're getting something like a meal score, it's important to know how that was determined, what factors they considered. Were they being like the developers or the system itself, depending on how the decision making was set up? Were those decisions made on a very small or specific data set? Was there any bias present in that original data set, and was it monitored, evaluated, and iterated to improve or mitigate those biases? So really understanding all of that is critical to create the best experience for your end users, but also for yourself in your organization, to make sure that you're compliant, and even outside of compliance, just a responsible organization. Something that Mariette had mentioned earlier that I just wanted to clarify in case not everybody had heard of this. So edge computing, this is something that is becoming more and more popular, and it refers to computing that takes place as close to the data source as possible. So edge AI is when you have a deployment of AI algorithms and AI models directly on a local device. That could be like your phone or your smartwatch, or the camera in your house, all of these different smaller devices, which are known as Internet of Things devices. This is something we're going to see more of, where you're moving the computing directly to that device rather than relying on cloud infrastructure. And when you are bringing that closer to the device, it also means that you're expanding the possibilities. So you're going to have more and more ability to get data from your end user and from anybody that you're trying to gather this data from directly at the source and have it processed there, which will, of course, increase the amount of data, increase the amount of personalization, and ultimately have higher risk as well. And I'm just calling out some of the data points on this slide that you might see typically in this industry. So something like sleep patterns, food diaries, height, age, weight, face scans were mentioned, vital signs. Mariette had brought up biomarkers before. So you might be collecting some very, very specific and individual data that is sensitive and needs to be handled as such. And something that I want to call out and related to the EU AI Act, for that higher risk category, there are also certain cases where the decisions and the way that systems are used is completely prohibited around sensitive data. And something like biometrics or face scans, if used in a way that makes certain assumptions and categorizes the end user into a bucket. Let's say the system makes a decision that based on this face scan or this information, you fall into this race category or this gender or sexuality category, and thus we are going to give you this kind of experience or recommend this kind of nutrition. That kind of categorization can actually be prohibited. And even if not making those categorizations in those specific for those specific parameters, something like race or gender, you will likely fall into higher risk if you're using something like face scans or very sensitive data that you've collected from somebody that indicates their health and wellness. So something that's super critical to understand about data, and one of the most important things that I can advocate for is really thorough data governance and understanding where you're gathering data, how it's being processed, who owns it within your organization, and who is governing it throughout the entire life cycle. And then ultimately the way that AI systems are using that data to make decisions. And I'm coming from a background in managing data engineering portfolios, so it's something that's very dear to my heart, and I will always push for. But really, the data is what's behind all of these AI systems, so it's not something to be ignored.
Right.
And then some practical strategies. So Emma was mentioning this a bit earlier, and I was just calling out data governance. You can start with intent. So thinking about the EU AI Act and trying to dive into it and understand the entire regulation can be quite overwhelming, which is also why we're here today. There are some ways to navigate the Act that we can call out in a bit that make it more approachable. But outside of just complying with this Act or with other regulation, which is also super important, having a strong understanding of how you are operating within your own business and the impact that it has on your customers is just what it means to be responsible. So one of the most practical things you can start with is knowing what your intent is with the AI system that you might be building or using. or just the data itself, are you using that system to promote the health and safety of your customers? Because as Emma mentioned, that is also the purpose of this regulation. While it does support innovation, it is meant to protect the health and safety of those that fall within the union. So if you have that intent to start, that's already a really good place. And then prioritizing data governance. So that could be classifying your data, having really strong data lineage, which means you're able to track how data is moving throughout your systems and where changes were made, why they were made, etc. And having really strong ownership of whoever is going to be responsible for that data as it flows between your systems, and ultimately be responsible and be able to have your customer trust what you're doing with that data. And having an inventory of your projects. So if you start with nothing else past the intent, if you just write down all of the different projects that you have going on that are using AI, for example, you might have a team that's working on a chatbot that is interacting with your customers, and then you might have something that you're building around facial recognition, and then another one around meal scoring. That can get quite large, all of these different projects that you have going on. They might all be using data in a different way, having different outputs. Having this inventory really makes it easier to track what is going on within your organization, how you can be more responsible, again, for your customers, and be able to monitor and evaluate how these are tracking for yourself, to know where you're seeing really good ROI on any of these different projects and which ones need to be adjusted. Transparency is also a really important element of being compliant and being responsible. So understanding your systems, as Emma mentioned multiple times, and their decisions and their outputs. So even if you have a really clear understanding of the systems that you've put into place, whether you have been building something in-house or you're using a third-party system, if you have really strong governance around that, but you're not sure why certain decisions were made, or it is a black box, as it's called, on the outputs. So what your end user is actually seeing in their recommendations or in that final score, whatever it may be, it's super important to understand how that decision was made, so you can articulate it to your customer. And so for yourself, you can make any changes that are necessary if it doesn't align with what your goals were. And disclosing to users when they are interacting with the machine. So this could be something like a chatbot where you mention, this is just a bot. We are using generative AI potentially. Please know that any answers here may vary or need to be double checked, things like that. That kind of disclosure is critical for building trust, and informing them when any biometric categorization or recognition systems are being used. Again, that falls into those higher risk categories. So transparency is one of the biggest obligations. And then maintaining documentation and audit logs. So again, this goes into the governance, it goes into knowing what's going on within your own business, and being able to keep track of it. The documentation part and audit logs being when things were changed and why, and who made those changes, will allow you to be a lot more ready and able to adjust for different regulations, and continuously monitoring. So even if you followed all of these steps, you were 100% compliant based on a system as it was in that point in time. As things are rapidly being developed, as things are changing, as engineers are getting excited and finding different tools to work with, choosing different ways to improve a personalized output, that might change what you had originally checked all the boxes for. So knowing what changes happen and continuously evaluating and monitoring will allow you to maintain that compliance over time.
Great. Shall I go with this one? So thanks, Emma and Allegra. So here we have kind of a combined slide, I would say. So really looking at the regulatory side and looking at the nutrition side, like where can domain experts lower your risk in terms of being an innovator or an entrepreneur? Well, I put awareness as the first one, because I think with all the data points that I think were mentioned before, many companies don't actually know that either they are sitting on data or they're collecting data that is higher risk, because they think, well, we're dealing with nutrition. And so it's really making sure that working with domain experts can help you to lower your risk, to highlight and train the team, for example, in terms of what data is really being collected and where does the risk sit. And how is it that data being interpreted? And of course, whether there's bias or not. And so that is going to be really important. So if you have a very diverse team who maybe not coming from a tech background or not from a science background, it's important that those different perspectives are being heard, and that everybody is starting from the same page. And the second one is about transparency. As was mentioned, definitely transparency is incredibly important and is becoming more important as, you know, trust is being eroded, not only in terms of the science, for example, in terms of experts, but it's really important that consumers can trust what you are saying and that they can find the information themselves as well. So transparency is key, and domain experts can help you to make sure that you have the right documentation in place to be able to demonstrate that. And then, of course, as mentioned as well, the right processes need to be in place. If you don't have the right processes in place and things develop fast, it's very difficult to go back and knowing where things changed, when they changed, who changed them. People leave their jobs and leave you with a folder or an online folder, and you don't know where things have changed. And so I think domain experts can really help you have the right processes in place so that you can always have a really good feedback loop to make sure that you can correct, that you can explain, and that you can improve. And then, of course, communication as well. It's not just about communicating internally about what you are doing and how you are planning or going to comply with the AI Act. It's also about how you communicate externally. So in terms of communicating what's on your website, for example, what's in your terms and conditions, what is your ethical code of conduct, these are going to be important pieces of information to let consumers and practitioners, for example, know where you stand and how you actually use AI in a responsible way. So with that, I think we'll throw it open to a Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the rest of the questions coming in as well. There you go. And so let's start off. We have some questions in the chat. Let me just open. Yes, HIPAA compliance is important. How does the legislation deal when the user wants to share their data for their own benefit? Is the responsibility shifted?
Yes,
Emma.
so this is my kind of question, I would say. I just want to highlight that we are focusing on the EU AI Act today.
Yeah.
It's in its initial phase, which means that actually no one fully knows how this regulation will be applied, and all these different use cases that will be coming up will help shape the regulation as well. This also means that we have plenty of other regulations already that covers compliance in other ways. So I also want for all of you to be aware of the fact that the EU already has regulations on data governance and data privacy and other types of frameworks in place as well. So the EU AI Act does not exist in isolation to all of those. When it comes to consent and whether the responsibility shifts depending on how the user is sharing their data, consent is important. And again, with a regulation that is changing, with a technology space that is rapidly changing, and with also society and the needs of consumers changing really fast, it's better to go back to communication and looking at responsible principles for how you develop your AI product. So yes, consent is important. Does it shift the responsibility in the EU AI Act? No. The responsibility will always be on the company or on the organization that is providing the product as such. This also means that even if the product is from outside of the EU and it's being used in the EU by EU consumers, you still have a responsibility. And this also means that you have the data of the consumer, and then you are responsible for the system and the output as such of that system, and the decisions and the assumptions that are made based on the information that the user is providing. So yes, consent is important, always. And this is not something that is based on the EU AI Act. This is based on previous regulations and other frameworks, and it does not shift the responsibility in any way, on the provider or the supplier of the system as such.
Great. There's another question here from Bogdan. Hi, Bogdan. Having a CE mark will cover EU AI Act requirements. So does having a CE mark cover that?
So again, the CE mark is focused on consumer safety and consumer quality. This means that the regulation behind the CE mark and the reason as to why we have to certify our products that we offer on the EU market, that might overlap with some of the scope of the EU AI Act, but that doesn't automatically mean that it covers the requirements in the EU AI Act. And I would rather say it's the other way around, actually, that the EU AI Act and the scope of the EU AI Act it's much broader, and it also looks at internal systems and internal data, meaning that these principles that both Allegra and Mariette mentioned in terms of data governance, regularly checking in on how you're using the data and how you're building your product and how the market and expectations of the regulator is changing, is key.
I think that also brings in the next question around the postcode, because I think, that's one piece of information that's commonly connected, especially if you're going to deliver something, right? You need the postcode, but it's how that's being then used in terms of the algorithm, right? Can you expand on that?
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. This is a really, really good question. And Allegra, I bet that you also have some things to say around this. I would just like to say again, the context of the framework as such. It also depends on the purpose. It depends on the other types of data involved. It depends on the system that you're putting the data through as well, and decisions that are being made through it. Allegra, I bet that you could expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so to start, postcode falls into what is called PII, so personal identifiable information. It can be considered like a non-sensitive PII, but because when it's combined with some other data elements, you can find out who this person is based on that kind of information, which is what this PII means, is that you're able to identify who the person is from a piece of data. And so that can be quite sensitive depending on how it's used. And so in the question, it's asking, will the postcode category be a discrimination? So as Emma was mentioning, it depends on how that postcode is being used and if it's being combined with other data elements to help identify who that person is. And that could be high risk. So if it's used in combination with other data elements to make a decision for a person or to provide a personalized experience, and it is profiling an individual based on that, it could fall into the high risk category. If it's used in a much more limited capacity and it's not trying to give a personalized experience or categorization, it might not. So as with most things in regulation, and everything depends on the specifics. But yeah, I hope that helps a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also like to add here that proportionality and purpose of the data that you're using is really important here. So only use the data for the purpose that it makes sense for. And also, now that we're talking about compliance and data and regulation, I know that it can seem quite abstract sometimes, and for some people boring. Luckily not for the representatives of Lumiera and Qina. This is our favorite topic. But just bringing it down to what it actually means is that personalized nutrition can we're dealing with clients that might have allergies of different sorts, for example. The way that a decision is being made, then understanding the decision and how it affects an individual. If they have an allergic reaction based on the fact that you've used their postal code to make an assumption about what they should or should not be eating, for example, and not taking other types of relevant data into consideration, or even using data that is not fit for purpose, this means that it's going to have an actual impact on the clients too, on the users. So I think that is something that is important to keep in mind always, this real this connection to reality, basically, and why we're doing all of this.
Yeah, which brings us to Gustavo's question around how thin is the borderline between AI decision and an AI recommendation? Can you answer on that one?
Yeah, they're a little bit different, and they can be used in different ways. So a decision doesn't necessarily mean a recommendation. A recommendation might be the end of a process that you're using with AI. So if you think about like a recommended meal plan, or if you have like a recommendation of different food choices or products to buy, something like that, that could be a recommendation, and it's based on past data and some context that is being provided to the system. A decision might not be a recommendation. It could be a decision to access a certain system. It could be a decision to take a certain action on the behalf of a user, or to fill in something. Like, it's not always a recommendation in that way. So recommender systems and engines are a certain category of AI and machine learning, and AI decisions are not necessarily the same, but they are related both to outputs. So I hope that helps.
Great. So we have a question from Miriam, which I think we can spend the next 14 minutes just on this one. And so I think it's a great question. How best to propose to address the implementing these rather abstract requirements of the AI Act for the multitude of possible use cases and individual life cycle design decisions in light of AI's inherent dynamics. So I think if I just start off on this one, and you guys can do the technical and legal part of that. But I think from my experience, a lot of times companies within the industry don't even have a technical document or a good technical document. So you ask them, can I see it? That's what a good practitioner would always do, is send me your product, a file or something that I can read it myself. And it's like a 2-pager. And so there's really, really skeleton information that doesn't give you any insight about how decisions were made, which data was used, who made the decision, which scientific papers were used to develop the algorithm or recommendation. So I think from a nutritional, and behavioral science point of view, I think it's very important that from the beginning, you get everybody around the team at the table and let the experts, sit together with you to be able to ask those questions in terms of, show me what you have, and let's draw out everything from all of your drawers and all of your inboxes and your cloud files in terms of what you actually have, and understand what data you have and what potential gaps you have, and of course, what are you already delivering that might put you at risk. And I think it's very important from a nutritional point of view. Even nutrition, nutrition is very broad. It's very broad. And so for us, especially at Qina, so we work from prevention all the way to medical nutrition. That's a very wide spectrum. And so even within that, the science is always changing. So you cannot write your algorithm in stone, because the science changes, the regulation changes, consumer behavior changes, and the products on the market are also changing. And so there needs to be a dynamic exchange of, information and knowledge, and also ideas to make sure that happens. So for me, your technical document should be accurate. It should be up to date, and it should be a live document that everybody in the team should be critically analyzing and contributing to, so that it's something that can be shared externally for audit or review. So that's my part.
I'll take over. So we'll go from the broader overview over to the business strategy and more sort of legal leaning part, and then I'll hand over to you, Allegra. So thank you, Mariette. I think that all that you're saying really makes sense. And then in addition to that, what we do at Lumiera is that we do support organizations with AI strategies and relating to AI and data in a responsible way, but also in a way that is hands-on, so that you can actually do something with the theoretical stuff and move your organization or your product forward and make sure that your customers are happy or your users are happy, and make sure that you are building a high quality product that is really making you a competitive actor on the market. And something that we see a lot is that we tend to lean towards the technically knowledgeable people when we are setting up an AI strategy or thinking about who should be involved in a change process or in the building process of a product. In order for things to work and in order for people to be aware, especially getting EU AI Act ready, we are looking at the way that the organization works and the way that it's built and the way that information flows through the organization. This involves people as well. And how do people relate to change? How do they communicate with each other? We have the business strategy and the way that you make money and pricing and all of these other things, different stakeholders. And then in addition to that, we have the tech and the tech solutions. And all of those have to be combined in order to actually set a strategy and to make it work in reality. And in this type of preparation phase, a lot of it comes down to, except for documentation that you already mentioned, Mariette, it's principles, it's the core values, it's the things that we can move with, regardless of how regulation is changing, regardless of how your customers are changing or how the market is changing. If you make sure that you have some good guidelines in place for how you approach the way that you build a product, for how you document your processes, for how you make sure that different stakeholders are in the loop and communicate with each other, that is the absolutely best way of making sure that you can go about it in a good way. And then again, step by step, as you're mentioning, Miriam, as well, and it seems like you're very knowledgeable on this topic. It's a wide scope that the EU AI Act is handling. There's a multitude of use cases and processes to be handled. So also set your priorities. And that is something that we can also help you do in Lumiera. Look at what are the most low-hanging fruits or the most pressing priorities for your organization or for your product. Allegra, do you have something to add?
Allegra.
So you're right about this question. It is a big one, and there are a lot of ways to approach it. So coming from the more technical side, so you mentioned a couple of things in this question, one being AI's inherent dynamics, so opacity, things like that. So one thing I would recommend is understanding which models you're working with and which technical decisions you're making. So rather than just choosing something off the shelf or building without taking into consideration why you are building the way you are, I would urge everybody who's working in this space and who is trying AI and developing it and or buying it and using it is to understand which models are chosen for which reasons. So there are many use cases where people are throwing like a rocket ship onto something that doesn't need it, right? And AI is not always the solution for everything. And really advanced AI models are not always the solution for something. You could have a really simple or straightforward use case, or one that is very needs a lot of guardrails around it, and you want the outcome to be very specific. And therefore, that would require more transparency. And you would want to use a different kind of machine learning, potentially. You might not want to use generative AI, or you want to use a specific kind of model that is known and has been benchmarked or evaluated to be better at that kind of task. And that will help on the opacity side of things, because if you choose a simpler model, you'll have more transparency and you'll have clearer insight into the way that decisions were made. And that might be best for your use case. You might not want this black box, super complex model to be handling something when it is related to very sensitive decision making. And then the other one you had mentioned around accuracy metrics. So there are a lot of different evaluation frameworks out there for AI right now. There are many for LLMs specifically. So if you're working with something like a chatbot and it's using generative AI and you're coming up with recipes or something, a nutrition plan for an end user, there are ways to measure the accuracy of the output, how it came to that decision. If you have a bunch of different studies and reports you're pulling from and data sets, you'll be able to use specific evaluation metrics to see where and why it was pulling that specific summary or how that summarization happened. So there are technical evaluations and quantitative ways to measure the accuracy of the output. And then there is actually now recently the technical mapping of requirements to the EU AI Act. So there's a company that put this out. It is open source and available for anybody to use and to put into their systems. It's called Comply. It's a resource that we can share with you, I think, when Mariette shares the deck. And it is the first and only mapping right now of the EU AI Act into technical requirements that you can actually build into your systems. So that's already a huge step forward. And there are many other frameworks that you can use and put into place. And one last resource that I want to mention that we'll also share is that you can actually go to the EU AI Act page, like the government site, and there's a compliance checker on there. And you can put in, you can answer some questions. It's very straightforward, and it will give a categorization of where you fall into risk based on certain parts of the act. So there are a lot of resources out there already to get you started, to understand where you fit into this. And then everything else that Emma and Mariette mentioned around strategy, around your processes internally, all of that will help you build a more robust organization and better systems as well.
Great. So we have 4 minutes left. So thank you so much for that question, Miriam. So just as Allegra mentioned, we will share some of these resources when we send out the email, so that you have the direct links to Lumiera and to us at Qina. We've written a white paper on the ethics of AI in nutrition and behavior change as well. And of course, just also to mention that at Lumiera and Qina, we've combined our expertise to help companies, of course, make sure that they actually understand the EU AI Act, especially if we're looking at nutrition or personalized nutrition, precision nutrition. And so we are very keen also for companies, if you have a specific question or you are looking at what this means for your company, that we are available as well to help you with the right documentation and kind of nutrition side, as we discussed now. As Emma mentioned, the EU AI Act, it's still for me kind of a tongue twister. I don't know if it's for you, or it's like EU AI. It's still really early, and so these different compliance, it needs to be it will happen at different stages, which means when you get off this webinar, don't panic that you will get a knock on the door to check your AI algorithm accuracy and your documentation. There is time, but of course the fact that you're here and the fact that you're interested shows us that, of course, you are already aware that this is coming. I've been at a lot of events recently where people didn't even know about the EU AI Act. So there's still a lot of work the EU needs to do to make sure that from the nutrition and the health side, people are aware that this will impact them as well. So With that, the recording will also be available. If you log in again, you got this far getting into this live room. If you log into your dashboard again, under the free resources, you will get the other webinars that you can listen to as well, and have the presentation slides available. And of course, you can also sign up for future ones. We were planning to have a monthly webinar as part of the Qina subscription of the Elevate plan as well. So you will be notified via email when the new webinars become available in 2025. This is our last webinar for this year, but thank you very much for all your questions. And thank you, Emma and Allegra, for sharing your knowledge. I'm sure we'll have a lot of work on our hands moving forward. And that was a great way of spending the hour. So thank you so much. And we are right on time. And yeah, it's 2 o'clock on our side. So thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next one.